Hello, uh, I'm Andy Schmuckler, bringing a series on a better human story, which is intended to change the way we think about ourselves, change our view of ourselves, because uh, it indicates a way of understanding what's happened to us by looking at the process by which we got here, of evolving biologically on this planet, along with everything else, and then taking the step onto the path of civilization, with the consequences that that book proves that it inevitably would have, such that I say that the ugliness we see in human history isn't human nature writ large, because the step we took unleashed inevitably a destructive force that has defaced the course that we've taken in the evolution of civilization. And that's one way in which it should change the way we think about ourselves. Uh, but I'm here this time to talk about our inborn experiential tendencies, uh, which are many and profound, actually. I mean, fairly many. I'll list a few of them in a few minutes. Um, in an evolutionary perspective, which is what I'm trying to look at all the implications of what we know about how things emerged, including how we got fashioned over, however, 3.5 billion years, if you go back to the very beginning of our ancestry, up until we became the first species to step out of the niche in which we evolved biologically. But when we can see that there are certain universals of human beings that relate to the experiential realm, we can infer that there are some things that are sort of part of human nature. And if they're part of human nature, that means that evolution selected for them, that those who had those experiential tendencies were more likely to get their DNA into the future than those that did not have those experiential tendencies. That's the beautiful Darwinian idea, that there's a process of selection. Those things which are more conducive to survival, statistically speaking, become more and more predominant in the species population. And here we are with whatever it was that got selected for because it was advantageous. Now, in evolutionary theory, there are some things, I think Stephen Jay Gould called them spandrels, that are not necessarily adaptive, but are the byproducts of something else, which I guess presumably was. And there are other complications, but for the most part, it is entirely legitimate, particularly for the areas I'm going to be talking about our experiential tendencies. It's entirely legitimate to assume that these are in the human genome, because they were more conducive to survival to have those experiential tendencies than to lack them. So the question for each one of those human universals is, what was advantageous about that? And I've done this actually with respect to two things already about experiential tendencies. One is that we, and a whole lot of other creatures, have a spectrum on the experiential space that goes from better to worse. The creature regards this as a positive experience and wants it. It experiences this as negative and doesn't want it. You don't want to drop a rock on your big toe. It hurts because this is not a good thing to do if you want your DNA into the future. So better and worse emerge in the evolutionary process. And I talked about why that would be, because the better and the worse correspond with motivations, and the ones who are motivated to do the things that were conducive to survival, which is experiencing things as better and therefore going for them, that motivation is selected for because those things were correlated with our ancestral past. So dropping a rock on your big toe is something you try to avoid. And then there's sexual pleasure, which got selected for because it was important to get the creatures, our ancestors, to do what was necessary to get their DNA into the future. And so on down the line. So for each one of these things, the better and the worse, you can say, well, with respect to the better and the worse, it's got to do with motivation to seek out what feels better. And the other dimension that I said became real as emergent reality, and we know it because people experience it. I mean, they experience the spiritual dimension, that there is in the human genome, evidently from all the evidence, a capacity to have experiences that are of a special nature. And in that video about spiritual reality, the spiritual dimension, how it's life-saving, life-serving, I go into some of the dimensions of what, but it's got to do with the depth and the impact. There might be an emergence of a sense of a value to the nth degree that we sometimes give the name sacred. This is simply empirical reality about cross-cultural, trans-historical. People have these spiritually transformative experiences of different natures. Some people get hit on the road to Damascus. Other people have burning bushes, and I've had my own, which led to that book, by the way. Life, they're so impactful. People have had various kinds of experiences down at that deep level that led to their life being going off in a different direction as a result of the impact of that experience. And people come back with a sense of, this is true. I mean, it's really true. This is an important truth. Special spiritual truths that people have as a result of these experiences. And the individuals and even whole societies tend to enshrine the truth thus arrived at. So I think it can be, it's simply true that it's part of the human genome that there is that capacity, not necessarily in everybody. Something doesn't have to be in everybody to be a human universal. If it's something that it's plenty to have one, what's the word I'm looking for? Shaman in each hunting-gathering band. If one is enough, that maybe you don't necessarily have it appear in each person that's born into the society. You just need to have enough of it. But again, when you say need to have, the question with the spiritual was, what can we infer from the fact that that is part of us, that we have these kinds of experiences? And I think we can infer that these impactful kinds of experiences have mostly been motivating in life-serving directions. You know, whether it's love thy neighbor as thyself, which is a life-serving way of looking at things, or the protection of that which is sacred to one. But there's like an Avatar discussing it earlier, the sacredness of things that people can experience that leads them. There must have been something about having that capacity that led to experiences that had the consequence of people being more likely to do what survival was going to require. So the people who had a shaman or had, you know, a custom of cultivating in their young the capacity for a spiritual life, that they tended to make better decisions than the people who were not, whose genes did not have that capacity built into the experiential realm. Anyway, so as a result of those two, I say it proves some important truths, which the secular worldview, to its detriment, have not well recognized, which is there is a reality in the realm of value. And it's the only way there could be a reality of value. And the secular worldview that's given reality value a second class status, opinion, subjective. Instead, we can build a reasonably good concept of a moral dimension that would be useful to have, to be able to see, for example, that there is a difference between those things which make the world better and those things that make the world worse, between good and evil. And then there's the spiritual dimension, which also I can see is a place we should get to more and more, to turn back the battle between good and evil that's going on in our world right now, where evil has just won a victory that is quite possibly going to prove one of history's greatest catastrophes. I'm hoping for better, but there'd be nothing surprising about some catastrophic scenarios that spin out from here. But we have ways of understanding that what's at stake is what's sacred. And so it behooves us to connect deeply with the spiritual level at which that which is beautiful is very much to be cherished, and that which is ugly to be pushed out of the world. I use beautiful and ugly there, and that's another experiential tendency that's inborn in us humans. I don't think anybody would quarrel with the assertion that every culture, that it's just ubiquitous that people are moved, get a certain kind of pleasure from the perception of beauty. And it can take various forms. There can be the beauty of a sunset. And maybe this is something we share with some other animals. Maybe some of these pictures of animals sitting on a hill watching the sunset. I don't know. But we know it about human beings, that we get a special kind of pleasure out of, beautiful things, beautiful music. We even talk about beautiful people. So what is that thing, and that it should give us pleasure? And of course, it gives us pleasure, meaning it's something we are motivated to seek. So why would that be there? What does it lead us to do when we seek out beauty? What are the consequences of valuing beauty that would have led our ancestors who got that pleasure and sought that out to survive better than those who didn't? And I have an essay about that if you're interested. If you go to a betterhumanstory.org and put into the search box abetterhumanstory.org. You put it in the search box, beauty. You'll see an essay where I talk about why I think it is conducive to our survival, that there would be a selection for the people who valued beauty. And it's got something to do with things being ordered in the right way. And us being cultural animals, as we became increasingly cultural, we grew in our capacity to be disordered. Instinct has been ordered by natural selection. The opening up the range of ways of being by becoming a cultural animal, it creates greater possibilities of wandering us out of proper order and into disorder. So I think the pleasure of seeing things being as they should be, and I go into that at that essay if you want to check it out. Another experiential tendency that's inborn, I think it's easy to see why it would be adaptive, and that's finding the world interesting. The experience of being engaged with one's world and finding it interesting. And we're not unique as a species. I don't know if we're unique in any of these things, to tell you the truth. But I'm guessing we're sort of unique about beauty, and we may be fairly unique about the spiritual dimension, and there's reasons why that might be. But finding things interesting, they say curiosity killed the cat. An evolutionary perspective on that would say that may have happened sometimes, but cats wouldn't be curious unless the curiosity had not killed the cat, but helped the species to survive as the curious got their DNA into the future better. And so I have a piece about that too that you can find also on the website about finding things interesting. Are things inherently interesting? Well, what could that even mean, inherently interesting? It has to be interesting to somebody. Same thing with beauty, which doesn't mean that beauty is just in the eye of the beholder, because the beholder's eye is not random. There are a lot of different beholders' eyes. They don't always agree, but the human eye for, say, beauty is not random. Likewise with interesting. Our interestingness is in the interest of the being that's finding it interesting. And it's rewarding to find the world interesting. So you look for things that are interesting, and you take an interest enough that you learn something about what's going on in the world, because that actually turns out to be adaptive. If you pay attention to the world and you learn about what's going on, you're more likely to make decent decisions. And you're more likely to pay attention to what's going on and to seek to understand it if you find it interesting. So little kids find everything interesting. Kittens find everything interesting. Puppies find everything interesting. And human beings probably are among the most able to continue to find things interesting. Though my adult cats still can find things interesting, and they get pleasure from it. They like something to explore. And so do I. So I hope that you'll stay with me here and check out how I lay these things out on abetterhumanstory.org. There are a couple I haven't written up that are human universals. I've made some stab at the explaining that we find things funny, that we are creatures with a sense of humor. Um, and humor is important to us, at least to many of us. And the question can be asked, what was it? What was the reason why there was a process that selected for among our ancestors, selected for those with more or better sense of humor or more orientation to utilize humor? Well, how is humor conducive to greater survival? And there's some interesting things to say about it, but I don't feel like I've gotten to the bottom of it. But there, or maybe it's a multidimensional thing. But in any event. And then the other one that's also unresolved in my mind is the value of music. It is a human universal. I mean, there are individuals who are amusical, that they don't they don't know what music's about. They don't hear it as music or something like that. I mean, I've read a little bit about it, but I don't know what the experience of music is for the people who are amusical. But most people have a responsiveness to music that's not trivial. I think most people. It seems to be a kind of a human universal, also. From civilized empires to hunting gathering peoples. There's music that plays a role in their life that's not trivial. Now, how did that get put in there? What was, and maybe it's got to do with the way music pulls us all together along on the same trip. Cohesion is very important for the human world. Anyway, but I don't really feel like I understand well at all. But it is legitimate to ask. Maybe it's obligatory to ask. What is it inside? What is the value of this thing that we've got? And when we know the value of that, maybe we will realize that something life-serving better. So I think that our learning to relate to our nature in a different way, where we see all those realms that are life-serving, that are in our experience, and to have more respect for what was built into us to value, to seek, because they were life-serving. And the more that we can care about the good versus the evil, the more we can tune in on the source of insight into the sacred, the more we can value beauty and want to push ugliness off the stage, the more we can find the world interesting enough to understand what we're up against. Because we live in a world where such amazing dynamics are at work that you could get fascism to come to power over the course of a generation, sufficient to kind of, at this point, apparently take over the United States of America. There is so much that goes on that is more amazing than our fragmented way of looking at the world generally is. So I offer as an integrated picture my Better Human Story in this video series, which I invite you to subscribe to, and in a series of systematic presentation and writing of a variety of components of this integrated picture of the story of our species and what we're challenged to do, and why we've come to the pass that we've come, both as Americans, yuck, and as a species, yoy. So, abetterhumanstory.org. Thank you. Bye-bye.